Thank you very much for permitting me to speak. My name is Mary Pendergast. I have been working in the field of food and drug regulation and law for 33 years. I have my own consulting firm. I'm speaking on my own behalf and not on behalf of any client or board that I might sit on. And I didn't intend to speak, so I'll be very rusty. But my first point would be that when you are looking at these small diseases, I've heard lots of speakers say, we need international trials. I'm going to ask you to be more radical and say, we in the United States have X number of people with this disease. We are going to figure out what's the right therapy for those people on that basis of US population. Do not compel these parents and small companies and foundations to go abroad to do their studies. Accept the fact that you have a tiny population and that you're going to work within that tiny population. So that would be my first recommendation. My second recommendation or statement is that the Food and Drug Administration has all the authority it needs to be wildly flexible when it comes to orphan drugs. And I think that you are choosing, not you personally, but the agency as a whole is choosing not to use the flexibility you have. I think that this may be a question of leadership, but it is certainly a question of education. And so I would propose that until such time as you decide, perhaps, to have one specific division just doing orphan products, and I understand the merits of that, and I also for my fondness for the FDA, always like to think that normal review divisions can handle everything, but perhaps they can't. And perhaps rather than train all the reviewers in all the divisions to think flexibly, maybe it makes sense to have a smaller cadre of people who think more flexibly. But I think that in the interim, while you're figuring that out, you could write a set of instructions or education for every FDA reviewer in every division from the bottom person on up to explain what flexibility they have. You do not need placebo-controlled trials. You do not need randomized you don't need randomized trials. You can use historical controls. If you look at drugs, section 314.126 has a section that says every aspect of every clinical trial can be waived. You have all the flexibility in the world. The law doesn't say, the law used to say, or the FDA used to interpret the law that you needed 2 trials. Congress amended the law and said 1 is enough. There's since been interpretations that not even 1 placebo-controlled trial is necessary. Case controls are fine. We approved thalidomide based on a retrospective analysis of patient records down at the CDC Hansen's Disease Center in Carville, Mississippi. You can use Bayesian statistics. You don't have to use frequentist analysis. You can use adaptive trial designs. You can have letter agreements. I was the architect of the accelerated approval program. And before we put it into regs, we would have letter agreements with companies. Because the reason why we were hesitant to take risk putting a drug on the market was because the rules for taking a drug off the market are really hard for the agency, and they take formal evidentiary hearings in about 10 years. So we invented something we called easy on, easy off, which was a letter agreement with a company that they would give us X amount of data. If it was acceptable, we would approve the product, but if later evidence showed that the drug didn't work, they promised to take the drug off the market and not to compel us to go through the statutory scheme for drug withdrawal. That's perfectly acceptable. We then formalized that with the accelerated approval regulations. No reason why you can't go back to letter agreements. No reason why you can't change the accelerated approval regs. The other thing is you haven't changed the accelerated approval regs after Congress changed the law. A lot of people here have said, accelerated approval doesn't work because we can't do the phase 4 trials. Go look at the Food and Drug Administration Modernization Act. it gets rid of that requirement. FDA never changed the regs, but the law has changed. You don't have to compel someone to have that phase 4 trial if you don't think it's appropriate. You are scientists, you are physicians, you make the best possible decisions you can. Another thing is you don't have to have full process validation before you approve a drug. We imposed that requirement in the 90s. Go back and look to see what CBER was doing before the 1990s. In fact, I'd say go look at what Marion Finkel and Bob Temple were approving drugs on in the 1960s. The law hasn't changed except to become more flexible. But like barnacles on a boat, the requirements have aggregated and aggregated and aggregated over time. And you should remember that you don't have to impose every barnacle. You can choose not to. And what it takes is for this community and for your leadership to be willing to figure out what are the barriers you have. Your concern about not approving based on smaller data sets. I think one of the concerns from my years at the FDA was that everybody hated to be hauled up in front of Congress and castigated. Or everybody hated to have a whistleblower colleague complain about a decision you'd made. That's a leadership issue. And I encourage the most senior people at the agency or yours to make the commitment that no reviewers go to Congress, they'll go and back you up. Thank you.